Hi everyone, the Fine Gael so-called think-in has been taking place in Mullingar in advance of the resumption of the Dáil in the middle of September. Now, a number of government ministers were asked a number of questions, and one I want to specifically speak about today is a question that was asked of Patrick O'Donovan. He is the Minister for Communications for Fine Gael and a Limerick TD. Now, he has been tasked with overseeing the National Counter-Disinformation Strategy. Now, he was asked a question about the public consultation. In the public consultation, 83% of people involved in this consultation were opposed to this strategy. But when did the democratic will of the people ever matter to the Irish political establishment? Now, he said this is about deciding what's news and what's fiction. And he said that it's to counter the disinformation, the misinformation, and wait for it, a new one, malinformation, being pursued online in particular. And he said that the public should have access to a trusted news source, and that would be for current affairs and for local news as well as national news. And they also said that he would be looking at commercial radio also as well. And interestingly enough, he said it is to move to get rid of gossip, and he said deal with fact. Isn't that very interesting, this whole national counter-disinformation strategy? Now, of course, let's go into a little bit of detail on this strategy. Now, of course, it goes against the prevailing narrative, but the detail of the strategy is fascinating because it goes back to the European Commission back in 2018, where they push forward this action plan on disinformation. And the idea was to create hubs in many European Union member states to counter the so-called disinformation from the biggest purveyors of disinformation in the first instance. Quite a bit of hypocrisy there, maybe a bit of disinformation coming from the establishment. And interestingly enough, currently there's 14 hubs in 28 countries, and wait for it, Dublin is one of those hubs, unsurprisingly. Now, in 2020, there was a commission tasked called the Future of Media Commission to look at recommendations how the changing face of media in Ireland in terms of public service broadcasting. And they came up with a 284-page report and 50 recommendations. And interestingly enough, following the European Commission's action plan, they set up this Future Media Commission and then set up working groups with all government departments and of course non-government stroke government organisations to push this agenda through. Relevant stakeholders, of course, wasn't ordinary people involved in this. So I hark back to the recent public consultation, which 83% of people were against this strategy. And they had set up a lot of organisations around this as well that I'll go into. And this was to push through the Online Safety Act, the Media Regulation Act and the Digital Services Act. We all know about that, to counter freedom of expression and freedom of speech. And what's really interesting with this is that they also paid to set up this European Digital Media Observatory. Now, this was supposed to look at fact-checking, and they have offices actually in Dublin City University, and the head person in there is also the assistant head of communications department in DCU as well. Very interesting, isn't it? And they've also pushed the use of public money, for instance, through the European Digital Media Observatory to pursue their agenda to challenge so-called misinformation and disinformation and pay for journalists. For instance, the Journal has a fact-checking ability within their organisation. Of course, the Journal is a news source in Ireland, online media source in Ireland as well, that has regular newspaper reports. And they have a person that's paid nearly in full by this European Digital Media Observatory. Of course, you can hark all back to the European Commission. And what's also very, very interesting with this is that, wait for it, the World Economic Forum are involved. Are we really surprised at this? Because in early 2025, there was a global risk report which said what are the short-term risks, and one of the short-term risks and the key short-term risks is disinformation, misinformation. And they claimed that This would fuel instability and undermine trust in governance, complicating the urgent need for cooperation to address shared crises. So here we have the Irish government implementing what their globalist bosses are doing to counter the prevailing narrative. And also what's very interesting with this is that they've set aside money in the budget. Up to 16 million this year has been set aside in the 2025 budget. We'll wait for the new budget in about a month's time to see what money is put aside for this. And this is to support journalists and news sources that are serving the public interest. They've also given money in terms of pushing forward news on local issues, on local courts, democracy, all this sort of stuff in the local area. And they've paid specifically €3 million towards commercial radios to get your news sources correct, and news sources, of course, that you can trust. Now you can make up your mind if you can trust it or not. And what's very interesting with this is that there's also local newspapers that have been paid off with this. Some newspapers, such publications such as the Anglo-Celt, the Sutherland Star, we can go many more, Dublin Inquirer, upwards of nearly €100,000 were paid out of this fund towards these organisations, and many more, all parts of the country, in terms of commercial radio and also the printed media and also national media as well. We've seen up to 130,000 being given to the Journal, 120,000 to the Herald Independent News and Media, and 130,000 to the Irish Examiner. And also with television, apart from RTE, we know about the 725 million given over the next 3 years for RTE. We can look at many more of those organisations such as Bauer, Media House and all them as well that have been given a lot of public money. And also Virgin Media was given €250,000 to push forward and produce rather a documentary called Misinformation Nation, which is part of the agenda. So here we have it, the National Counter Disinformation Strategy, which the public are wholly against. And of course they've got their stakeholders on board. They've paid their media lackeys to do their work across the spectrum of society, not just RTE, into your local media, local newspapers. As well as that, you've seen the local commercial radio stations being used as well for this. And this has all been administered through on Commission Naman, the Truth Ministry here in Ireland. Of course, this has power for rolling out the Digital Services Act right across Europe, based here in Dublin. And of course, many of these tech organisations have their European headquarters here in Dublin, of course for the tax haven reasons, and not to mention that to push forward these Digital Services Act as well. So where's your trusted news sources? It's really just ludicrous what's taking place in society. And as I said, when you see the global risk assessment being pushed forward by the WEF this year, it's all knitting together. So Patrick O'Donovan is only implementing what his bosses are telling him to implement, proclaiming he's standing up for the interests of trustworthy news, and they have the fact checkers at the ready, of course. But of course, this is completely Orwellian and a drive towards a dystopian society, totalitarianism. We've seen many people work in the media go on to highly paid jobs working as government advisors. And this is how Ireland works and how the corrupt gravy train works in Ireland. But it's really to waken people up to what's taking place in our Irish society. And please share my videos, and I'm very grateful for everybody who continues to support my work through Buy Me a Coffee. Thanks so much to everybody. And on top of that, please share them. Please get the news out to what's really taking place in society, how they're acting against the interests of the people who have even involved themselves in this box-ticking exercise, so-called public consultation, where 83% of people are against. But we know with previous referenda, the most recent referendum, but the vast majority of people voted against them. If it's put to the people will say no. But this is what's being pushed through the Houses of Oireachtas over the next period of time. So let's see how this develops as well. But it's to make people more aware, and please share the videos and speak out to what's taking place. It's absolute nonsense, and it's a dangerous slide into totalitarianism. So thanks so much for the support with all my videos, and from Dublin today, Slán go fóill. Take care, bye bye.